Thank you. Thank you, Congressman Perlmutter, and hello, everyone, and welcome to today's virtual event hosted by Congressman Ed Perlmutter and featuring NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine and NASA Artemis astronaut Matthew Dominic. I'd like to thank the students from the Congressman's Youth Advisory Council, as well as some of his former congressional interns and current staff for joining us today. My name is Suzanne Gillen, and I am the Associate Administrator for Legislative and Intergovernmental Affairs at NASA. And today's event will feature some opening remarks first from Congressman Perlmutter and Administrator Bridenstine, and then we'll hear from astronaut Matt Dominic about his journey from growing up in Colorado's 7th District, Congressional District, to become one of the astronauts that may walk on the moon in 2024 as part of the Artemis program. A few quick housekeeping items. First, the event is being recorded and is open to members of the media, though I don't believe there are any attending. Second, I would respectfully ask that everyone please keep their microphones muted for the duration of the event, except when called upon to ask a question. Questions were submitted in advance, and students will be called upon to ask their previously submitted question. With that, I'd like now to introduce Congressman Ed Perlmutter. Congressman Perlmutter was first elected to represent Colorado's 7th District in 2006. In the recently begun 117th Congress, the Congressman will continue to serve on the House Rules and Financial Services Committee. He's been a member of the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, which is the committee that actually oversees NASA, and that's since 2015. And we've heard that he hopes to continue to serve on that in Congress. With that, I will turn it over to Congressman Perlmutter.
Thank you, Suzanne, and really, it's I'm just happy to be able to do this event with you, with my friend Jim Bridenstine, with a local kid, Matthew Dominic. And, as you said, I serve on 3 different committees. The Rules Committee, which is great for a lawyer. The Financial Services Committee is what I did for most of my legal career. But my passion has always been the Science Committee. And I became good friends with the administrator when he and I served on the Science Committee together. And Jim really did become one of my closest buddies. And, everybody hears about the partisan divide and all of that stuff, Democrats and Republicans. And, we're having some of that right now. But I can tell you there is a lot of, more often than not, there's agreement. There is a real desire to work together. And I'll tell you just a quick story about Jim Bridenstine, who was on the Science Committee, had been on it before I got on it. And I got on it, and he was having a meeting with a bunch of scientists and engineers up in Boulder. And he gives me a call, out of nowhere. We really hadn't known each other. I'd just gotten assigned to the Science Committee. He says, how'd you like to go to dinner with a bunch of folks up in Boulder? And I said, sure. And so we went up, we met with all of these individuals who, brilliant folks. I understood some of the conversation. I didn't understand all of the conversation, but it was delightful. And Jim and I became good friends, and we worked on a lot of things together. We spent a lot of time together. Doesn't mean we agreed on everything, but we agreed on a lot of things, especially when it came to space. And I'm very delighted that we're having this gathering because so many of the students who are on my advisory council and so many of the students who've been my interns have had this special interest in space and in science. And so, Jim, just so you know, we have high school students, we have college students, and we have graduate students participating in tonight's Zoom, or whatever you call a Microsoft Teams, I guess. And, we have my staff who I know people, Jeff O'Neill worked with me over on the science, does a lot of work with NASA, Jamie Nickel, Hannah Mullen, Jeremy Imans all work in my district office, and they helped put this thing together with Suzanne. And we're very fortunate to have Matthew Dominic join us as part of this gathering. And I got to tell you, when I saw a Wheat Ridge kid be selected to be an astronaut, part of the new class of astronauts, I can tell you right now I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. I'm so just proud and excited to have that kind of close connection between our area and our space program. So, I could go on all day. My advisory council and my interns have heard me go crazy on this subject in the past. But I'd like to turn it over to my friend Jim Bridenstine, who I guess I turn it back to you, Suzanne, and then you. I don't know exactly how Jim is introduced, but I just want to introduce him as really a close friend, somebody who I was so proud to support being selected as the administrator for NASA, who I think has done a hell of a job.
Thank you.
Who, remembers all the people he works with and has really, I think, excelled. And I was, even though we've got a new administration coming in, I was going to go to bat for you again, Jim, to continue to lead the agency. But I will turn it over to my friend Jim Bridenstine. The only drawback I'd say is he's from Oklahoma. And, if he were from Colorado, then he'd be a perfect 10, but he's from Oklahoma, so he's about a 7. So I'll turn it over to Jim Bridenstine, a graduate of Rice, who served in our military, has a tremendous gift to remember names and places and people and things. And Jim Bridenstine, my friend.
Well, thank you, Representative Perlmutter, my good friend Ed. I'll tell you, thank you for that very nice introduction. And again, thank you for all of your amazing friendship and support throughout the years. And I remember very well getting the nomination to be the head of NASA and going to my Democratic friends and saying, hey, look, I need your help. And Ed Perlmutter, you were the first one there. And Jeff O'Neill, you were working the staff members on the Senate side to make sure that I could get through. And boy, I'll tell you, this has been, leading NASA has been the honor of a lifetime. I don't know what I could possibly do next that would ever match this in my life. And Ed, I appreciate all of your help and support in getting me to this point. And of course, I hope I've done you proud. We're putting together a program that we call Artemis, and it's a big project, but we're going to the moon with a purpose. And I know this is what Ed is all about. You guys out there, Representative Perlmutter, he doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the walk. He is all in on human exploration of space, discovery, science, and taking all of those capabilities for the betterment of humanity here on Earth. I worked with him on the science committee. He really does delve into these issues in a great way, and he backs it up, and he asks for the resources to achieve the objectives that he believes in. And so we have had some success. We put together the Artemis program. It's very simple. We're going to the moon, this time to stay. We're going with commercial partners. We're going with international partners. This is new. Last time we went to the moon was 1972. We didn't have any commercial partners. We didn't have any international partners. We didn't have the technology to use the resources of the moon to live and work for long periods of time. We call it in situ resource utilization. And now we're going to the moon. We're going to use the hundreds of millions of tons of water ice that have been discovered on the moon. We're going to use that water ice for life support. The oxygen, of course, is for air to breathe, and the H2O is for water to drink, and the hydrogen is, in fact, power available in hundreds of millions of tons on the moon. And we're going to learn how to live and work on another world for long periods of time with a purpose. Because when we go to Mars, we're going to have to be there to stay. The challenge with Mars is that Earth and Mars are on the same side of the sun once every 26 months. And I know, Ed, I know you know this so well. Ed has a bumper sticker he holds up all the time. It says, Mars 2033. I know. I was looking for mine this today as well, and I don't have it with me. But Mars 2033. Why 2033? Because if you go to 2035, 2037, you can only go once every 2 years. So the earliest opportunity is Mars 2033. And of course, Ed has been fighting for us to get the budgets to achieve that. Now, here's the thing. When we go to Mars, once you get there, you're not in alignment on the same side of the sun anymore. So you got to be willing to stay. As Mars orbits the sun, it takes about 26 months, and then once that is complete, you can come back to the Earth. So so we've got to learn how to use the resources of another world to live and work for long periods of time. That's what the Artemis program is all about, learning how to do that at the moon so we can take that knowledge and capability to Mars. The word Artemis itself, Artemis in Greek mythology, is the twin sister of Apollo, and she is the goddess of the moon, which is when I heard Artemis was the twin sister of Apollo and the goddess of the moon, I said, this has got to be the name of the program, because in this time, we now have, which we didn't have in the 60s and 70s, we now have this very diverse, highly qualified astronaut corps that includes women. This time when we go to the moon, we get to go with all of America and really represent all of us and have every young person see themselves as having these, really audacious opportunities to do stunning achievements. And so that's why we call the program Artemis, but we're going with a purpose, and that is to get to Mars. There's a lot more we can talk about when we get into the questions, but before we do that, I want to introduce somebody who has become a good friend of mine, Matthew Dominic, who is an astronaut from District 7 in the great state of Colorado. And by the way, I can say, look, I love Oklahoma. Make no mistake, it's my home, and I'm going to be going back to Oklahoma. But I think, Ed, you probably have one of the best districts in the country. It's absolutely gorgeous. You've got a lot of amazing space activities going on there. It is a delight. Every time I've been there, it's been fantastic. So District 7, we've got Matthew Dominic, young guy, became a Navy pilot, actually went to the University of San Diego first, studied electrical engineering, had a minor in physics and I think mathematics. Then he decided to join the Navy, went through ROTC when he was in undergraduate school, became a Navy pilot, flew combat, has, 60 or so combat missions, then went to test pilot school and got a master's in systems engineering as he was going through test pilot school in a cooperative program. Became a test pilot. He's got 400 plus carrier arrested landings in F-18 Hornets. And it's not by mistake that when he put his package in to become a NASA astronaut, he got selected because he is the best that America has to offer. We're very proud of him. We're looking forward to his future exploits in space. And he's young enough. He's one of those guys who could not only be a person to walk on the moon, but he might be one of the first ones on Mars. So with that, Matthew Dominic, I'll turn it over to you.
Sir, thank you. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I missed the last half of your call there. We had technical difficulties and signed offline, so we went to the backup mode. I'm on my my NASA work laptop, so I think you guys can see and hear me. I'm seeing head nods. That's exciting. I'm pulling up a quick presentation on my computer so we can talk through it here. We're going to backup mode, but hopefully it should be seamless. Standby 1. I think you should see. I'm looking at John. Can you see my slides?
We can.
Oh, good.
Okay. I don't know if you see the preview or not. We're going to just keep working with what we got. So you can see the moon, right?
Yes.
Awesome. I can't tell you the number of hours in my life that I've just stared at this moon and thought so many things. And I think back to a question that one of my favorite professors used to ask on an exam. He was a physics professor, and he used to say, ask yourself a question and answer it. And it was one of my favorite questions. And I often think about the moon, and I ask myself, like, what are you thinking about when you look at the moon? And I think about so many different things. I think about moving humanity forward and going to the moon to stay and going there, not just to touch it and come back, but going to stay. And I start thinking in my engineering mind about what do we have to do to get there? How do we set up the logistics? Can we use the resources we have there? How do we learn from this to go on to Mars, right? How do we go there in 2024 to support Mars in the future? And there's just so many things the engineering mind starts to ponder of how you go to stay, because it's just so much different than going to touch it and come back. And that spirit of exploration, that spirit of wanting to know and go forth, was really what drove me to NASA. But I got that growing up in Colorado. I got that growing up in Wheat Ridge, looking up at the mountains. Like, how can you not look at the mountains of Colorado and not get an exploration spirit? So you could imagine, like, you get accepted and I'm yanked out of the life I had, and I'm instantly thrust onto my first day of the job. And this is a picture of the first day of my job. Here, like, the vice president shows up for your first day of the job. You could imagine, like, all the thoughts going through your head. And so I'll take you to that moment, and then I'm going to yank you back to early part of my life. There I am in Wheat Ridge, right? That's at the old Elitch Gardens, right there off 38th, when it used to be right there, not when it was owned by Six Flags, but that's right there in Wheat Ridge. I'm right there in the front seat of an airplane, wanting to go faster and higher, and I got that spirit right there. And there's the shot of Wheat Ridge looking to the mountains, right, to the Table Mountain. That's where exploration came from. So, administrator talked about my background. Electrical engineering undergraduate degree. I just wanted to understand the world around me so I could explore further, right? Every time I found a boundary that kept me back, I said, okay, I'm going to go get educated. I'm going to go learn so I can move beyond this boundary. And I joined the Navy, and I started flying Super Hornets. This is my squadron off of this boat, right? And, you know, my mind thinks about, how do we make this happen? How do we land on this boat? Here it is, you know, next to another ship. How do we land on this thing? And you know, they say a picture is 1,000 words, but there's, like, this one picture for me means a lot, because this is me coming back from my first combat deployment, serving in Afghanistan or over Afghanistan. And there's an airplane strapped to a flight deck, like, with chains, and there's water right there. And that behind me is the Straits of Gibraltar. Like, that's just off the coast of Spain. Like, this is so crazy. There's so much going on. And so I wanted to push further and go farther. And I said, well, how do I do that? So I became a test pilot, went and got my master's degree and studied further, and ended up being the lead test pilot on a program that revolutionized how we land on aircraft carriers. Like, we completely changed how we land on aircraft carriers forever. It is silly easy now. And that's what it should be, because that's not the mission. And so that same skill set, maybe I can talk about it later, the same technology and concepts that we use to change how we land on aircraft carriers, I've been meeting with all of the vendors that are competing right now to build landers to land on the moon, and we're using the same concepts. I sit down with those vendors and talk to them about the concepts of how the technology we use to land an aircraft carrier is the same technology we should use to land on the moon, and how and why it's applicable, and how we can make it easy so we can go there to stay. We can make it sustainable. So these are pictures of what it's like as we, you know, use a test aircraft to revolutionize how we land on an aircraft, an aircraft on an aircraft carrier. I'm going to go through these quickly because I want to get to my favorite part with his questions. But I wanted to show you, like, you know, a part of my journey, how I got here, but also remind you that my journey to be an astronaut is one of many possible journeys. There are so many people in our office with such incredible backgrounds. I kind of think of it. I think of it this way. I've been on a few expeditions out into the wilderness with members of our office. We're sitting around a campfire after a long day of exploring and training and working together. And it's like a roving band of Wikipedia. Like, I don't need the Wikipedia. Like, everybody's there. Like, we got geologists, we got scientists, we have engineers, we have veterinarians, we have all kinds of people from different backgrounds. And it's so exciting to have conversations, and you could ask any question you want, and there's somebody there. So my background from military aviation to go to NASA and be an astronaut is one path, but there are so many other paths, and we need all of those paths in order to go to the moon to stay, and to Mars for that matter. Here's a UAV I got to work with landing on an aircraft carrier, and then, of course, launching off the aircraft carrier. This is a picture of the first F-35. Like, this is the exploration spirit inside of me. This is the first F-35 landing on a ship. I'm not in that jet, but I'm the one flying the jet next to it. And for Administrator Bridenstine, who's also a naval aviator, I got to fly in the Case 1 pattern parade formation as the F-35 went to touchdown. So I'm in tight formation with an airplane that's trying to land, and I flew it all the way to flight deck level and waved off to the starboard side. It's an incredible experience to be there for these first, to go push human civilization forward. And as we talk about that, like, this is my military job. I'm still active duty military. This is us flying in Japan. After I was a test pilot, I went back to Japan to serve. to keep bad people from doing bad things. And that's, I kind of think it's really important. I don't kind of, it's really important as the Department of Defense to keep the world from going backwards, to keep humanity from regressing. But this small portion and hopefully bigger portion of the budget for our government is spent on NASA. And that part we spend on NASA is about pushing humanity forward. So we spend huge resources keeping us from going backwards, but we invest to make sure we can still keep going forwards. Then I was yanked out of this job in Japan, happily so, and now we're back. Now I'm at NASA. Holy cow! Can you believe it? Like I've got this dream job. How do I not screw up? And that is that moment right there. I'm sitting there staring at the back of the vice president's head, going, "Oh wow, I need to not screw this up." Because at some point there's a good chance I will be responsible for this. Like I will be on this space station as one of 3 to 6 to 8 crew members responsible for something that over 16 countries have come together and poured their heart and soul into to build this international asset. It's an incredible thing that we've had people on board for over 20 years, and the things we've learned. I was just sitting in a meeting yesterday with 3 flight surgeons. It was 3 doctors and me talking about, my medical going forward and how we're, all the training and those things. And they said, yeah, Matt, back in the day, an astronaut would come back and, we would take them weeks to recover. Now we've figured out how to fix that with various techniques on the space station and on Earth, and they're running upstairs on day 2 after being in space for 6 months. Low Earth orbit was the proving ground. We're going to go now do that with the moon. We're going to go learn how to live on a gravitational body other than our own and make that a proving ground to move farther into our solar system. Those are the things that I think about when I see pictures like this. And this is our home. We have to fix it. And I kind of want to show you a few pictures of behind the scenes, but this is the day you go to get fit gloves, right? The process of getting you fit out to wear a spacesuit is incredible. The amount of people that come together to make that happen. You stand in your underwear in a 3D scanner for 3 hours where they 3D scan your body to figure out which spacesuit fits you best. This is the day you show up and you put your hands in gloves for the first time, like a spacesuit glove. It's crazy. And then to make sure it really fits, they put it they call it the glove box, but it's really a cylinder, and they suck all the air out to make sure that it feels right and it fits you. This is what it's like to put your pants on. You put them on 2 legs at a time. And this is my very first time putting on a spacesuit. And there's people helping you. You're putting it on for the first time. And I was so excited that there was a person there to capture the exact moment when I popped through. They just happened to be taking a picture. My excitement is you get your head up through that small hole and pop out, and like, this is really happening. And of course, there's teams of people everywhere making it happen. This is one of our training facilities. It's a short brief. We could go into details of how well this works. But we get lowered into a pool, and it's important to put your helmet on before you do that, otherwise you'll drown. So we do that here, but then you go underneath, and there you are, the International Space Station, built underwater as a mock-up to practice working and fixing on our home in space. We have tools. These are 3D printed tools for underwater, for training, how to drive bolts and move parts and move parts and pieces and fix the space station if it breaks. My family gets to come out. I just wanted to share this picture because you could see my youngest daughter right there freaking out, looking up at her dad like, what is dad doing at this thing? Why are they going to lower him into a pool? It's super exciting to watch my 2 daughters and wife and all of us as a family go through this together. And of course, I'm super excited to be a part of it. I'll breeze quickly through some of the cool parts of the space station. Like, this is the Canada arm. Like, it's an international effort. There it is, just going around the Earth. Here it is grabbing pieces of cargo, like another spaceship that comes up to attach to the International Space Station. We carry astronauts with us. Like, we just throw an astronaut on there. I spent 3 hours in class before this brief today learning how to control the arm with an astronaut on the end. That was part of my day today. We also learned Russian language. This is an international effort, and it really hit home for me. Like, this. I was in Russian class earlier today as well. Dobry вечер. Меня зовут Matvey. But the international effort really hit home for me. I'd been here a week, maybe 2 weeks, and every Monday morning we have an all-astronaut meeting. And I sat down and I walked into the room. I'm a new guy. I sit down in my chair and I introduce myself to the gentleman next to me, and he has a Russian accent. And I realized he was a Russian cosmonaut. And so after the meeting, I went out and it's kind of cool at work. You can just kind of look people up, and I looked him up on the internet, and I realized his background. And he was a he used to fly blackjack airplanes, Russian bombers that used to fly over us. I used to stand on alert on a U.S. aircraft carrier waiting for him to launch. Somebody that we used to be an adversary with is now on my team. And that just blew my mind, that look what people can do when they come together and work. We work together. This is us out in the field and hammer at home working on geology. And we spend 10 days in the field learning how to live in close proximity with each other in training. And sometimes we agree and sometimes we disagree, and we have to figure it out, right? And that's what a lot of the training is about. And that's the only way we're going to fit it all together to go back to the moon, right? Like, we are going back to the moon. We're going to stay. Apollo was amazing, but this is about going to stay and building logistics. And we get to go on this giant rocket. Look at this thing. How can you not get excited looking at this thing? Here it is. This is an artist's conception, this one. This is the actual rocket as it rolls out. This is the one getting ready for the green run test on Saturday. I'll be there. Those are 4 giant engines, all going to light off for the first time ever at the same time this Saturday, 1600, I think, Central. But either way, tune in. Like, this is going to be crazy. I'm going to be there to watch this. I can't wait. We're going. And finally, like, these are the 3 companies right now competing to go land on the moon as landers. I worked and interacted with all 3 of these companies and talked to them about how we were going to physically land on the moon. What are the techniques? How do we want to control? What should the displays be? This stuff is super exciting. And I really wanted to get through those quick. I know that was a blazing fast, but that's because I want to get to the questions, which is always the most exciting and best part.
Well, thank you so much, Astronaut Dominic. At this point in time, I'd love to turn it over to Representative Perlmutter to start the question and answer session.
I thank you very much. And we have a lot of questions that really go to Jim Bridenstine and to you, Matthew. So the first one is from Tegan Watkins from Wheat Ridge High School. Her dad is a teacher there, taught with my wife at Wheat Ridge. And so Tegan, you're up wherever you are. Is Tegan with us?
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Hopefully you can hear me. My first question is for Administrator Bridenstine. What are the key goals of NASA for the next 5 years?
Well, great question. I think you kind of just heard Matthew talk about one of them. We want to go to the moon, and the sooner we get there, the sooner we can get onto Mars. So within the next 5 years, we'd like to be on the surface of the moon. I would also say one of the biggest challenges we face right now is our activities in low Earth orbit. Matthew showed you the beautiful images of the International Space Station and all of the training and logistics that goes into it. Here's what we know, though. In November of last year, we celebrated 20 years of humans living and working in space continuously. And by the way, before that, we think about 20 years of humans living and working there, it was under development long before that. So the bottom line is that the space station is old. And there's going to come a day when it comes to the end of its useful life. The question is, what comes next? And so what's happening now is we're seeing a lot of private investment, a lot of that investment, in fact, right there in Colorado, a lot of private investment into the development of space stations that are going to be commercially owned and operated. In other words, NASA is not going to purchase, own, and operate the hardware for the next space stations. They're going to be commercial in nature. Now, the question is, why are we so interested in this? Well, if we look at what we're doing right now on the International Space Station, we're advancing medicines. We're able to compound pharmaceuticals in the microgravity of space in a way that you can't do here on Earth. The value of space just in general is the value of microgravity, or think of zero gravity. What can you do when there is no gravity? Well, you can compound pharmaceuticals in unique ways to create treatments for life here on Earth. We can create immunizations, and we can advance immunizations. For example, we have an immunization for salmonella that exists because of our research on the International Space Station. In the United States, people are like, well, salmonella, that doesn't kill very many people. No, not here, it doesn't. But around the world, poor countries around the world, it's the 3rd leading cause of death among infants around the world. So that's a huge benefit. We've created an immunization for pneumonia, for example, and advanced immunizations for pneumonia on the International Space Station. So it's about treatments, it's about immunizations, it's about right now we're proving that we can create human tissue on the International Space Station in microgravity. If you tried to do that using your own stem cells, so I could take, let's say, Representative Perlmutter lost some flesh in a fire or something. I could take his own skin cells. Extract from there stem cells that we could take to the International Space Station and create Representative Perlmutter's own tissue that he could then use to regenerate on his own body. And it would be a perfect match, so it would work because it would be his own tissue. Now, right now it's just tissue, but eventually we want to do full-on organs. And the reason that's important is because it will transform lives here on Earth. We're advancing materials in space, like right now we're creating an artificial retina for the human eyeball, so that people who have macular degeneration don't have to go blind. They can continue to have eyesight, which is going to be a huge impact for a lot of people here on Earth. So the big thing I think is important in the next 5 years, number one, we're going to get to the moon. And we're going to get to the moon with a purpose. We're building an architecture that is usable at Mars as much as possible. And then the other thing I think that's important in the next 5 years is to have these commercial platforms be developed so that we don't lose our very exciting moment where we're seeing all of these developments for technologies and research in space that have been born from the International Space Station, but now we need to start turning to the private sector. Make no mistake, NASA will be a customer. We're going to be a big customer because we have a lot of research needs and we need access to microgravity. But I think there's going to be a lot of other customers. We're going to see industrialization, and I think all of that is very bright for the future. So Matthew Dominic might not just be going to the moon and Mars. He might be doing a lot of work in orbit right here around the Earth.
Jim, I think you got the next question.
All right. So this is a question. It looks like Dario Escabel. Is Dario around?
Yep. Yeah. Hi. I have a question for astronaut Dominic, actually. So what has been the hardest and or most interesting part of the journey between like high school to becoming a qualified astronaut?
Oh man, that's a big range. That's going to be a fun topic. Sorry, I think we're still fighting AV8. You might be hearing an echo. Okay, good. I think I'm always been a technical person at heart, and I feel like with the technical topics, you can just study harder and just work harder. The toughest part between and most interesting stuff has always been managing the ups and the downs, right? Like, I have made big mistakes in my career, and learning how to pick myself back up has been the hardest part. I hopefully he's not watching, but I remember one time I applied for grad school right out of college, and I thought I was going to be good. I was set up. I was going to go to get my grad school, get a master's in mechanical engineering, and I got rejected. And one of my professors I thought was going to be a shoo-in, like one of my favorite professors was a shoo-in, had written me a letter of recommendation. And it was one of these things that were sealed and it went off. But as I was sorting through my files, I found an extra copy of this sealed letter of recommendation. And I opened it. I shouldn't have. I opened it. And in it, he laid out exactly who I was and who I'd been in college. He's like, yep. Matt's involved in so many activities. There's all kinds of different things, but he just lacks focus. He's not ready for grad school right now. He wrote that in my letter of recommendation for grad school. No wonder I didn't get picked, right? And he's still my favorite professor to this day. I've actually talked to him since I've had this job and actually visited with him. But he just straight up told it like it was. And that was like, I remember swallowing that pill of failure. And me learning how to deal with it was huge. I remember the first time I was in training and I failed a flight, right? Learning how to like fail a flight and recover from it failing a flight would mean like when in flight school we go through training and flights are in events and they're graded and there's instructors. And I remember failing a flight for the first time and just learning to pick yourself back up. That's the hard part. That's the interesting part. I remember, I mean, obviously I'm military and I've lost good friends in the military, and that's hard. But you learn to manage that with the ups. Like July 20th, 2007, I found out I was going to fly Super Hornets for the Navy. Like these are like amazing ups. I could still close my eyes and be in the delivery room for the birth of my 2 children. I remember hearing the voice, like I'm hearing, I've got goosebumps thinking about, like the time that we're overhead Afghanistan and our forces are in trouble and they're whispering to you in their ears, like, hey, we're about to get ambushed. And we ended up stopping that ambush. And like, those are the ups, right? Like those are the ups and those are the downs. And those are about the journey that makes you stronger for this job, right? I remember being called in this job here unexpectedly, like, hey, we just had an issue with Starliner. We need you in the control room now. Like I was in my gym clothes. I had my dress up clothes to be on Capcom because I was on standby. And I remember I mean, maybe this is too graphic, but I remember my wife was at the bus stop. Hey, we need you in mission control right now. I just immediately dropped my clothes right in the living room of our house, put on my dress clothes, and straight to mission control. So you asked the question, what's the most interesting part of the journey? It's those like small moments of extreme intensity that you've thrown yourself into. Those are the parts. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answered it perfectly. Thank you so much.
That's a great answer. Thank you. Kenny Hora, who has been one of my youth advisors for some time. He's a senior at Legacy High School. Kenny, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. My question is for Administrator Bridenstine. I know Colorado has a lot of aerospace companies. So how does NASA and the Space Force plan to use a lot of the technologies developed in Colorado?
Oh yeah, great question. So yeah, Colorado is really, I think it's the one state that probably has more space business than any other state.
True.
I guess Ed would know about that. But so here's what's amazing. You've got United Launch Alliance. So they're one of our providers for a whole host of different rocket launches. You've got Sierra Nevada Corporation. They build a little spaceship called Dream Chaser that's going to be doing resupply for the International Space Station and eventually might even take crew to the International Space Station. We think about the importance of GPS, and our GPS satellites are built by Lockheed Martin right there in Colorado. There is it's like the right there in Colorado for whatever reason, probably because you've got Peterson Air Force Base nearby and Beale nearby, Schriever nearby. You've got really amazing national security space kind of commands there. NORAD is up there. There's just a lot of activities there in Colorado. But make no mistake, Ball Aerospace is in Colorado. They build a lot of our satellites that we use to understand the planet Earth and how it's changing. And I know Ed and I, when we first did our dinner there that he mentioned earlier in Colorado, we were talking about weather. A lot of people don't realize NASA builds all of our weather satellites. We build it for NOAA. NOAA is the operator of those satellites, but they're built by NASA. And of course, we turn to contractors like Ball in Colorado that do a lot of the great work. So whether it's Earth science or even planetary science, you guys probably saw OSIRIS-REx was a vehicle that went out to an asteroid called Bennu, and it grabbed a sample of Bennu. And now that sample is on its way back to Earth, and it's going to return in 2023. I saw OSIRIS-REx with my own eyes when I was visiting Colorado one time because it was built by Lockheed Martin there in Colorado. So there's a lot that Colorado can be proud of when it comes to space. Again, like I said earlier, I think Ed Perlmutter has one of the best districts in the country And it's not just for the beautiful mountains. It's because there's a lot of really unique space activities happening there. But there's no doubt NASA will use all of those technologies.
So Jim is absolutely right. We have a lot of businesses that are very involved in space and in science. We have laboratories here that are very key, and our institutions of higher education, whether it's the School of Mines, the University of Colorado, Denver University, Colorado State. I mean, we have some of the leading Air Force Academy. How could I forget that? Some of the leading institutions in America in terms of science and space, which all of these things work together. So between the government, the private sector, and our institutions of higher education, and then we have young men and women like Matthew and like all of you who really have a desire to excel in so many different ways, but certainly among the crew on my advisory council and my interns, a lot of very capable students wanting to excel in sciences and in engineering. And I was going to tell one story, Matthew, if you don't mind. You're talking about Lowe's. So I always wanted to be a lawyer. I thought about it. I was a senior at the University of Colorado, and I went and I took my LSAT, and I didn't feel very good about it, and I did not do very well, and I was terribly dejected. Well, I had a Spanish teacher at the university who said, take it again, you're going to do all right. I'm going, nah. So I set a whole other path. I was going to go to the School of Mines, do some geology, that kind of stuff. I took it again and I knocked the socks off of the thing. And I was admitted to law schools all across the country because the difference between my first exam and my second exam was just gigantic. Now they checked to make sure I didn't cheat, that there was some retest validity. But I can tell you, from super dejected to super ecstatic, by sort of shaking it off, kind of figuring it out. And I don't think I've told you guys that story. It was pretty interesting to not do so well and then to just really knock the socks off the thing. So Jim, you have the next question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll get to that. But I think you're absolutely right, Representative Perlmutter, when you talk about this virtuous cycle of developing talent and then having government and industry working together with academia to achieve what really has become the center of excellence for space, which is in Colorado. Okay, let's see. Jordan Rain is a junior at Lakewood High School. Is Jordan here?
I am. Thank you so much. My question is for you, Administrator, and also for astronaut Dominic. What have your personal experiences been like working with those private corporations, and where do you see that relationship going in the very near future?
Great question. So it's important. Like we are fundamentally trying to transform how NASA does business. There has always been this idea. We love Apollo. I mean, what an amazing era in human history to be able to go to the moon for the first time and all those things. But in those days, every dollar that was spent on space was spent by the government. There's no other industry involved. And so when you have that kind of dynamic, it caps you out. Basically, every dollar you spend is coming from the government, and then it becomes a zero-sum game where if you want to get another dollar, you got to take it from some other agency, or your agency could get robbed for a different agency. So, but what we have now is we have this commercial sector that you mentioned, this industry, and they're doing all kinds of things in space on their own apart from the government. We think about, Dish Network or DirecTV. We think about internet broadband from space. We think about XM radio. We think about all kinds of different remote sensing applications so you can see the surface of the Earth pretty much any hour of the day from whatever location you're interested in. So all of these commercial activities say, okay, well, if there's all these commercial activities and NASA has its own mission, What if we partner? Instead of NASA purchasing, owning, and operating the hardware that takes our astronauts to space, what if we just buy the service from a commercial industry that's already launching satellites? Or instead of, operating our own space station, what if we partner with industry that wants to operate a commercial space station? And all of a sudden, the zero-sum game where everybody's robbing everybody else to pay for things, all of a sudden now there's a much bigger pot and a lot more capability. And industry and government can actually work together with academia to ultimately get more research, more exploration, more discovery, and at the same time, make it more regular that we can do these activities in space. I'll tell you, the model I think is really solid. NASA's goal is to be one customer of many customers in a very robust commercial marketplace in low Earth orbit. But we also need to have numerous providers that are competing against each other on cost and innovation, so that there's always, an effort to drive down the cost so that we can all do more than we would otherwise be able to do. So I think the model is changing. It's changing rapidly. But when we go to the moon, we're not going to purchase, own, and operate the landers. Matthew showed you earlier some of the landing companies, and they're building landers with a purpose of taking American astronauts to the moon. But we also want them to go get customers that are not American astronauts or even our international partners. We want them to take commercial astronauts to the moon to do commercial activities, which I think is really, really exciting.
I think this is a fascinating area. My background, you asked about outside experience in this, and my background in the Navy as a test pilot, people think about test pilots as, pushing the edge of the envelope and just going out there and flying the airplane. But 95% of the test pilot job is not flying the airplane. It's working with the contractors and developing the test plans and putting it all together to go figure out if what a contractor is working on is appropriate. And I remember working with a variety of contractors there, and that background totally plays over to what I'm doing here at NASA, as I've worked with a variety of different contractors. And as Mr. Bridenstine's talking, I'm thinking about all of these crazy experiences I have. So I'll share one, but I'll also think about it here. Representative Perlmutter, there's a reason he works. He has YAC Youth Action something. Anyway, you have a group of youth here that he works because he wants to know what the new ideas are, right? He wants to see what you guys are thinking, right? He's seasoned. He's seen a lot of things, but sometimes a new perspective that he hasn't seen before is great. That's why you're here. Like, you provide added value to him, and him to you. It's a mutually beneficial relationship, right? So there are old space companies that have been around for a long time, and their knowledge is deep, and we need it. NASA has been around for a long time, and I've seen some interactions with some new space companies like, let's go do this thing, and NASA says, that's great. Like, we learned this lesson a while ago, try this, and they get excited like, oh, we didn't even think about that, and they get going, right? And that relationship is mutually beneficial to everyone. So new space, old space, private sector, government, working together, we're all feeding off each other. A rising tide raises all the boats. And I will share experience. I was down at Cape Canaveral, and I was getting tours of from various contractors at their facilities, and I'll leave their names out. So I went to contractor A, and they're seasoned, they're professionals, they know a lot of details about stuff. I trust them with so many things, but everybody's in khakis and shoes and belts, and shirts are tucked in, and we're very professionally going through in a very safe manner, looking at what they're doing and learning a lot from them. And then I went to the other company, and we got a tour, and we hopped on their bus, and we're on the bus, and their person that works for their company hops on the bus. He's got a tie-dye t-shirt on, and he's like, you guys want to touch rockets? Let's go pet some rockets. Like, there's new and there's old, and it's so exciting, and like, we're feeding off each other. I'm watching two companies, like old companies and new companies, and you look at everybody's feeding off each other, and it's an incredible idea to bring it together, because this competition is going to push humanity further.
Hello, everyone. Sorry to interrupt, but we are nearing the end of the program here. So I believe we have time for one more question and then closing remarks.
Okay, thank you. So Kate Schneringer She is at Lakewood High School. I should say that Matthew went to Davlin, so he was a Jefferson County high school kid as well. So Kate's at Lakewood. Kate, what's your question?
Hi, my question's for Administrator Bridenstine, and my question is, should the focus be solely on Mars, or is there still a case to be made for the moon?
Sorry.
Let me start with that one.
Okay, go ahead, Ed.
Let me start with that one. So just, Kate, you've heard me talk about getting to Mars. That's been my focus. And what we've determined from the science committee, and I've been agnostic, and Jim's heard me talk about this, as to what the building blocks are to get us to Mars. And the determination has been, and now I think everybody's all in, let's get to the moon, let's have a presence on the moon, learn, as Matthew's been talking about, understand, design, develop, and then we head to Mars. So I'll just shut up, but I want us to get to Mars.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think Ed, that's the consensus. If we can build an architecture at the moon that as much as possible is replicable at Mars, everything goes faster and we end up getting a lot more science and discovery. So when we think about the moon, there's a lot of reasons to go to the moon. There's a lot of reasons to go to Mars, and I'm going to talk about each of them for just a second. When we go to the moon, we're thinking about heliophysics. The moon is a repository of data and information of the early solar system. So we have had subatomic charged particles coming out of the sun now for billions of years. And those charged particles largely go around the Earth because we have this magnetosphere, and we've got a thick atmosphere, and we've got a hydrosphere, and we've got an active geology. So anything that hit the Earth billions of years ago isn't today where it was billions of years ago, and most of those items never hit the Earth anyways because we're protected by this magnetosphere. The moon doesn't have any of that. It doesn't have a magnetosphere. It doesn't have an active geology. It doesn't have an atmosphere. It doesn't have a hydrosphere. So anything that impacted the moon billions of years ago, whether it's an asteroid or charged particles from the sun, it's all right there. So we can go to the moon and we can learn so much about our solar system, the early solar system, that in the Apollo era, we didn't have the knowledge to know. Apollo was about demonstrating technology. It was about great power competition between the United States and the Soviet Union. That's what it was about. It wasn't really about science. Make no mistake, a lot of great science came from it. But now we want to go for this idea of science. So it's about heliophysics, the study of the sun. It's about Earth science. Before Earth, there was a proto-Earth where the moon and the Earth were kind of one big planet. And then something happened. It broke apart, and then it ultimately reformed. And it reformed in the Earth-Moon system. So in those early days after it reformed, here's what we now know. And we know from 2020, it was less than a year ago, we discovered using samples from the Apollo era that were just recently brand new opened. They've been sealed all these years, but now we applied today's technology to samples that were collected in the early 1970s. And we found out that the moon was at one time, it had a magnetosphere because these samples are polarized. So the moon had a magnetosphere, and a magnetosphere was in fact very strong. And in those early days after the Earth-Moon system came into being, the moon actually protected the Earth from the radiation of the sun, if you can imagine that, because it had a magnetosphere. And the Earth's magnetic field lines and the moon's magnetic field lines actually interacted, and elements went back and forth between the Earth and the moon regularly, which is how in 2020, we discovered rust on the moon. You can't have rust without oxygen. So now we're seeing that, look, the Earth-Moon system is far more dynamic than we ever knew before. We're discovering that there's water ice, not just at the equatorial regions, but all over the moon, there is in fact water ice. So when we go to the moon, it's about heliophysics, the study of the sun. It's about understanding the Earth-Moon system and the early days of the Earth-Moon system. It's also about astrophysics. From the far side of the moon, it's so quiet from an electromagnetic spectrum perspective that we can see so far into space, we're actually looking back into time. We're going to be able to see not just the first light in the universe after the Big Bang, but we're going to see the dark ages. We're going to start, in other words, after the Big Bang and before first light occurred, there was this period of time called the dark ages. We can actually see that from the far side of the moon because it's so quiet from an electromagnetic spectrum perspective. And there's so much more. And of course, the moon is the proving ground for getting to Mars. So the moon is an exciting place. It unites the scientific community. But here's the thing about Mars. And in the last 2 years, just since I've been the NASA administrator, Ed, and I think you and I have talked about this, we have discovered on Mars that there are in fact methane cycles on Mars, and the methane cycles actually match the seasons of Mars. That doesn't guarantee life, but the probability of finding life on Mars just went up. We have found that on Mars, we're seeing massive plumes of methane in some areas and at some times that a lot of scientists are saying, look, that's not likely geological in nature. That's more likely biological in nature. And of course, I'm talking about methane. We have found, my lights are going off in my office. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. But we have found that Mars is actually covered in complex organic compounds. The building blocks of life are all over Mars. They don't exist on the moon at all. Nothing on the moon, but they're all over Mars. Of course, they're all over Earth as well because there's so much life here. So when we think back, Spirit and Opportunity taught us that Mars at one time had a strong magnetosphere. 2/3 of the northern hemisphere was covered in ocean. And in fact, even in the last 2 years, we've discovered that there's likely liquid water still on Mars, 12 kilometers under the surface. And the NASA Phoenix lander discovered that there's pure water ice on Mars. It took a little scoop there on the North Pole of Mars and it grabbed pure water ice. So my point is the probability of finding life on another world is going up. And of course, I think the nearest opportunity to do that is at Mars. And if that discovery is made, and I'm not saying it has been made because it hasn't, but when it is made, if it is made, at that point, I think Ed's dream becomes the reality, which is every member of Congress is going to be throwing money at space exploration in a way that we've all hoped for a long time, because there's going to be so much excitement about, if we find life, and I'm not talking about bunny rabbits, I'm talking about microbial life. If we find microbes on another world, for the first time discovering life on a world that's not Earth, I think it's going to be such an exciting moment that members of Congress and senators are just going to be saying, what else is out there? NASA, go get it. Help get the private sector to join you and go find out what's out there. And I think that's a really exciting future. Okay, with that, Moon and Mars, it's both. We need both.
Matthew, you're up on that question, and then we'll close out, I guess.
Sure. I don't know if I can do this, but I think it's really important to understand scale. And I don't know how far this green screen works, but if this is Earth, I think the International Space Station is about here. So we're not. What my point is, we're not that far away on the International Space Station. Like, it is a big jump to go to the moon. And I think about history, and I think about learning from history so we don't repeat the bad parts and make sure we repeat the good parts. The South Pole of the moon, the South Pole of the Earth. We made it like in 1912 or so. We touched it and came back to the South Pole of the Earth. 1957, we were actually able to finally establish a base to figure out how to go to the South Pole of the Earth and stay. And you can go look it up. Like, there's a base at the South Pole of the Earth that people spend all year there, right? And we bring back incredible science from there. And then I think about the first time we sent a human into space, Yuri Gagarin, and it was about 40 years later that we figured out, like, we just sent him to space and he came back. That sounds like Apollo, right? And the first time that we put humans to orbit the Earth to stay was just 20 years ago. So you see like these 30 and 40-year gaps between when we first go and come back and when we figure out how to live and work there. And so the International Space Station, like I pointed over here, is only 250 miles from the surface of the Earth. The moon is 250,000 miles. So that's multiplying by 1,000. Do you want $1 or do you want $1,000, right? That's a big difference. And that's a sense of scale that I think I struggle to grasp it a lot. And so I have to break it down. And then I think about Mars. And Mars, you get to multiply by 1,000 again. Mars at its furthest point is 250 million miles. So if you multiply by 1,000 twice, that's 6 zeros, that's a million. So in this case, it's a little bit, I'm cheating a little bit. I'm only using distance. There's also velocities involved. You're not multiplying the velocity times 1,000 to get to the moon. I think people say, hey, the ISS is not far away, the International Space Station is not far away, but it is in terms of velocity. It's 17,500 miles an hour faster than we're going on the surface of the Earth. So for me, moon to Mars, to answer your question, I wanted to give you a sense of scale and how I think about the Earth and the moon and the ISS and what humans have done and where they're going. For me, you as an engineer, as a system engineer who thinks about these things all the time, we have to go there as a proving ground, right? Like how many of you can keep your smartphone for like more than a year without breaking it, right? And what happens if it breaks? You can go to the store and get another one, right? If you're on the moon and your gadget that not that you text your friends with, but the gadget that keeps you alive breaks, you're in big trouble. So if we go to the surface of the moon, which is where we need to be, we need to go learn how to build things that last. And I think about it's the little things that will bite you. Like think about when they went to the moon on Apollo, there was a door. And the door opened and closed a couple times when they went out to walk on the moon. It just opens and closes. And there's a rubber gasket around the outside, so that when they close the door and they go inside, the air of the inside doesn't go outside. Well, that rubber gasket only had to work a couple times. Now, if you're going there to stay, you got to make a gasket that works. Well, there's no wind and there's no water on the moon, or there's no rain, I should say. There's no rain. There's water. There's frozen water on the moon. That's what we're going for. But without those processes, the surface of the moon is just super sharp. All the granules are incredibly sharp. They'll destroy the seals. So if you start opening and closing your door because you're on the moon for 6 months, you're going to destroy your seals. And those are the little things that we have to think about and go figure out what breaks. And I think about Henry Ford. Henry Ford was famous for going to the junkyards. And he would walk around the junkyard and see what broke. So he would know what to make stronger. And then he would figure out what didn't break. And he's like, I can make that a little weaker. And so going to the moon is about going to go build stuff and break stuff and figure out what works and what doesn't. Because every little bit of mass that we take to the moon, it costs us, I think it's the ratio is 10 to 1. So a kilogram of mass on the moon, I have to have 10 kilograms of propellant. That means that I weigh 100 kilograms. NASA is paying, you the taxpayers are paying for me 100 kilograms to get to the moon. That's times 10. It's 1,000 kilograms of fuel on the Earth to get us up there. Plus, that doesn't even count for all the structure to hold the fuel in the rocket. So you have to be very careful what you choose to go. So to answer the question, going to the moon is about figuring out what to pack, what to bring, what's going to work, right? The first time you guys went camping in Colorado, you probably brought way too much stuff. And then you brought stuff you didn't even use. And then stuff broke that you're like, I don't need this anymore, right? And you didn't want to litter. Don't litter in Colorado. But you get my idea. So we need to go you weren't like, hey, Dad, I want to go to Everest. And you just took off for Everest, right? Or, hey, Mom and Dad, I want to go to Everest. No, you started in your backyard with a tent, and then maybe you did Table Mountain, and then you did the 14er, right? So that's what the moon's about. That's why we have to go to the moon. As engineers, we have to go figure out what breaks.
All right, well, I think we've got to wrap it up. And to my advisory council, to my interns, you guys have been great. I'm just so glad that we've been able to have a Coloradan join us and even an Oklahoman join us to really talk about NASA. I just, as your representative, this has been a tough time in America this last week or two, and something that I hope we can get through very quickly. But then there are things like our space program and engineers and scientists like Matthew, like Jim, who what we're doing in the space program transcends all of us, gives us a chance to think beyond any of us, to really look to the future, to push humanity, as Matthew has been saying, and to do it with people that we would ordinarily not do something with, the Russians or maybe the Japanese or the Europeans or whatever. The potential and the destiny that is out there for us is just incredible. And it's the kind of thing that allows humans to kind of get out of their stuff, you know, to think bigger. And I've got two guys, I got to admit, Jim, Matthew, you have really, your enthusiasm is so contagious because what you're doing is big stuff and it's exciting. And it's not that it's always going to be successful. In fact, you'll learn a lot from when you're not successful. But gentlemen, thank you for joining all of us, and to my interns, to my council. I'm looking forward to getting together with all of you guys and getting your impressions, because this was just a very fun evening, and it's really lifted my spirits. So if nothing else, I just want to thank you for joining us tonight. It's been a great elixir for me.
Ed, thank you for everything. You're a great friend. I think your words summed it up just perfectly. And thank you for being such a champion for America's space program. You're a rare breed on the Hill, and we're just grateful for all of your leadership. So thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody. Stay safe out there. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Moon.